So I'm going to just sort of wing this one, see if we can pull it off, just ad-libbing it. So here's Woodbury's example of a reactor, which is a circle radius and a point interaction. And the idea here is that you've got a point that gets closer to the center of a circle, and as it gets closer, the circle gets smaller, and as you get farther away, the circle gets larger. And then you do it in a field, and you get these sort of interesting interactions. Well, this is pretty similar to what we just did before, where we're just detecting direction and distance from an adaptive point, but I'm going to try and do it in a way that's a little bit more scalable and relies on a teeny tiny piece of API functionality. So first I'm going to make myself a field of play. Let's do this, make it about 100 feet there. And I'm going to divide my surface, and I'm going to go and make myself a panel that's going to work inside of that field. So I'm going to go new family curtain panel pattern based, and I'm going to make myself a circle that just lives on one of the corners of this. Put it on that one. So I'm getting my set work plane tool, I'm setting that work plane, and I'm just making a circle. Oops, I don't want it with a filled circle, so I'm going to turn off that. Alright, let's try that. And I'm going to make that a permanent dimension. And I'm going to make that a parameterized radius. We'll just call it radius. Making it an instance parameter, because it's going to want to be changed all over the place. And what I've got is I've got a little API plugin called compute distance to panels. And what that does is I get a target that calculates the distance from that target to each one of these panels. And this just allows me to sort of scale this. In the other videos we've seen that once you start adding a lot of geometry, it gets a little bit cumbersome. So you can start using the API to make things a little bit more scalable. So I'm also just going to hook this thing up so that I don't want to have a direct relationship between the distance from my target and that radius. So first I need to add a parameter that's an instance parameter. My plugin is looking for a parameter called distance, and it's going to write the distance from my target to the panel here in this value. So let's say that my distances are probably going to vary from like 150 feet to 0, something like that. So I'm going to call this 75 feet just for the sake of experimenting here. And why don't I call my radius 50% of that? So this is going to equal not 50%, but 50 distance divided by 50. That'll really just neck down that circle. I might have to monkey with that, but we'll go back and see in a second. So now I just have a circle. It's on there. I'm going to load it back into the project, and I'm going to populate my divided surface with this family. I've got all my circles here, right? Now what I need to do is I need to give this thing a target. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to make myself I'm going to make a new family. I'm just going to make a new mass, and I'll give myself a nice, easy to locate target. Just make myself a little circle, and actually want to make it a little smaller. Yeah, let's just make it a nice little point-like target. Load that back into my family, and I'm just going to put it here. Now this is going to be my target, and these are going to be all of the circles that are going to get adjusted by this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that, and I've got my API plugin that just computes the distance to the panels, and it's going to work. It's looking for the instances that all have that parameter distance in them, and then it's going to run a calculation for each one of them to drive that radius. And you can see, shazam, we've got all these different sizes of circle. Now maybe I want to get a little bit bigger on my circles, so I can just go back in here and I can change what this is. Maybe I was too conservative there, so it's going to be twice as big. I'll load this back in, and I can monkey with what these radiuses come out to. Now it's already written the distance to each one of these panels, so now it's just going to make an adjustment based on what I did before I reloaded it. So I can take this, I can put it into the middle, and I can rerun my plugin. It's going to recalculate. There's different ways that you can do these plugins so that they can always monitor this element, for instance, so that no matter when I move it, it'll always recalculate. This one is just set up so that you recalculate it on demand, which can be nice just because, you know, it'll cut down on your regeneration time and you can locate this thing just where you want it. Compute distance again. So I'm just using this as an example to show how you can do larger data sets without having the effort of manually placing each one of these points. But in order to do that, until we have sort of slightly different arraying functionality in the massing environment, you need to either manually place the things, and then you can do a lot of work through the UI, or you're going to need to have some amount of API work. And I'll also post this plugin, but I've posted this before, and it's a fun one. And just for fun, why don't we also just do how you can do this manually, that is without API tools. So I'm going to go into Family, I'm going to go to Adaptive Component, and I'm going to make a reference line that has 3D snapping, make myself 2 points, and make each one of them an adaptive point. And I'm going to make this one, I'm going to make it always vertical on placement. And what that means is that that blue arrow you see pointing up is always going to point up no matter what I place it on. And I'll show you in a bit what that means. But I'm going to go and I'm going to make my circle like I did before, right there on that horizontal work plane, with the curtain panel, but this time it's on an adaptive point. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to make that a permanent dimension. And I'm going to make that, same as I did before, call it radius. And it's going to be an instance parameter because it's going to change it every single time I place it. And I'm going to give myself a reporting parameter that's going to be on this line. And it's going to go from adaptive point to adaptive point. And I'm going to make this basically, well, I'm going to just call it distance also, as we did with the API plugin. So, and this is going to be a reporting parameter. So it's just going to be telling Revit or Vasari how far it is from point 1 to point 2 in every single instance. And just like I did before, I'm going to call this radius is going to be distance divided by 25. I think that's what we ended up with. And we'll see that as I move this guy around, my circle gets bigger or smaller. And I'm going to load this into my project. And we can see I've got my 2-point family, and if I grab just this one and move it farther away, you can see that my circle gets bigger. Now, the thing that I was showing you before was that making a whole bunch of these can be kind of a hassle. So I've got my line. I'm going to give myself my target point out here, and I'm going to take that family that I just loaded, which is the lovely named family 8, and I'm going to put it right there. And I'm going to take that guy, I'm going to tab into point 2, and I'm going to make a bunch of copies of it, and I'm just going to do this fast and loose because part of the point I'm making is a sort of a drag to do all this arraying. But it can be done. So this is again just doing the same operation but without any API tips or tricks. And I'm just going to basically make a manual array of all of these pieces. So I'm going to go copy and let me get into level 1 view. And I'm going to go copy, and I'll just, again, this is just a fast and loose kind of manual array, but you can see that we get the same functionality essentially from the API tool. So here's my target. I select my point, I bring it into the middle here, and all my points are going to reorient. Zoop. And just as before, I can go back in and I can tinker with what the exact calculation here is. Maybe I want everything to be bigger. So I'll do 10%, divide everything by 10. And I can load it back in, and everything should update. You can see right here, while it's regenerating, and everything just sort of snapped to attention. Where is it? Here we go. And getting that little point in there can also sometimes be a little bit tricky. But if I just want that point, I can move stuff around. Everything updates. And that is 2 ways to get the circular diameter reactor functionality.